Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Lori. Today I wanted to do a video on an update on energy right now and an update on where a lot of us are in this now moment. And this message is coming through pretty strongly from Saint Germain, who is an ascended master. If you're unfamiliar with him, he actually walked the earth plane many lifetimes. And he ascended in the physicality, in the physical form. And so and what that means is that he was a human like us with a dense third dimensional form. And he ascended into a much higher state of consciousness while in the physical form. And then he chose the day in which he would pass out of the physical form. But he's around pretty potently, as are many ascended masters. But the greatest thing about the ascended masters is that they understand what it means to be physical and human. And so this message is about us being physical and human as we ascend, as we shift, as we awaken, as we move into higher states of consciousness. I think for many of us, there is this reality that sets in of, oh, I'm not going anywhere. I am still in the same place, in the same house, in the same job, in the same relationships. I have to do this in this now moment with everything that's around me. I actually have to integrate this awakening process, integrate this shifting into higher states of consciousness when most humans around me aren't. And that's really what the energies are about that Saint Germain is telling me right now. So we just came out of a massive, by the way, congratulations everyone. October was, regardless of when you're watching this, right? It's always relevant in your now moment. And the messages may or may not resonate, right? So there's nothing wrong if you're like, oh, that message doesn't resonate with me, and there's nothing right if it does. But many of us went through a month of massive turbulation, shaking up in a way that allowed us to kind of clear our goggles even more and see ourselves as more of who we are as a multidimensional human. So it may have looked like there was a lot of pushing or shifting you out of old belief patterns, old paradigms, old programs, ways in which you have lived for a very long time. The structures are crumbling, right? And it can be like an earthquake, because it's like, well, what do I do now in this new state? Because even when the programs, paradigms, belief systems, the ways we've been living for so long, even as they crumble around us, we're still standing in the same life, so to speak. So the same car, the same house, the same job, the same partners, the same parents, the same brothers and sisters, the same everything. Yet everything internally and in my reality is crumbling. So we are being asked, coming out of that month, right, of massive courage that we kind of stepped into in October, right, of saying, yes, I want to step into more of my multidimensionality. Yes, I want to access more of my potential in these higher states of consciousness. And guess what? I am still human. I am still going to get angry and frustrated. I'm still going to drive the same car and do everything in the same way that I've been doing, right? As I crumble the paradigms and programs around me and shift myself into higher states of frequency. So I think there's this belief sometimes in the community, spiritual community, that as you shift and awaken, that things will all of a sudden dissolve around you, like magically, right? Like all of a sudden you just won't be doing the job you're doing anymore. You'll have some other miraculous, beautiful, magical job. Or All of a sudden, all your relationships will be perfect and beautiful, right? Like there's this idea that if I'm shifting and awakening, then everything's going to be magical and beautiful and perfect around me. And what this month is about is recognizing that in this now moment, the collective in front of us, behind us, around us, the large human collective is not necessarily where we as the light workers and way showers are. And so what that means is that we are going to step outside our front doors and we're going to be hit with government bureaucracy. We're going to be hit with political bureaucracy. We're going to be hit with and inundated with, you know, for instance, power outages for no reason whatsoever, right? Conspiracy theories, you know, all of these things we're still going to be hit with, right? You still have to follow the rules, so to speak, right? And follow the way it is to be a human. One of the messages that Saint Germain was coming in pretty strongly is love the humanness while you're shifting into higher states of consciousness, because that humanness is never going to leave you. The idea that we are trying so deeply and desperately to, and I get it, but to shift out of this human experience is defeating the purpose, because no matter what happens and how hard we try to reach those other kind of frequencies and consciousnesses, we're still going to find ourselves in the physicality of 3D. Even if you're living in a 5D consciousness, you are still going to walk outside and be inundated by 3D consciousness. And so what it entails, he was saying, was to first and foremost love every aspect of your 3D humanness. The fact that we even label it 3D, 4D, 5D is a disservice, he said, to humanity, because it separates it. It makes it different, right? And on a consciousness level, it's very different experiencing it. 3D consciousness feels different than 5D consciousness. We like the 5D consciousness. We don't necessarily like the 3D consciousness. But the key to this is stop trying to fight the human that you are. Stop trying to fight and push into this ascension process and journey of awakening, which is happening naturally to each of us, no matter what we do. That in every now moment, when you open your front door and you go out, first and foremost, can you love your 3D humanness? Can you love and integrate all of the miraculous aspects of being alive in physicality in a 3D form, and having this secret toolbox of you being a multi-dimensional human? That you have this awareness and consciousness now that you are so much more than this human form. And that all that is out there is only one spectrum of consciousness in a quantum field of so much more consciousness. And you can access those dimensional fields. However, can you access the other dimensional fields without escaping or being upset that you are still in the 3D consciousness, right? It's this time right now that we're moving into, is it because the 2020 that we're stepping into is about being able to hold everything. It's not about separating the spiritual from the mundane. It's not about separating 5D from 3D. It's not about separating heart-centered consciousness and egoic mind consciousness. It's throwing out any sort of separation or duality of any consciousness or experience. Stepping into 2020 is about honoring, loving, devouring, and being at peace in any consciousness you find yourself in. Because I've said this before, and Saint Germain was saying this the last couple of days, There's nothing wrong with any sort of denser consciousness you're feeling, okay? Because most humans out there, regardless of how enlightened or how advanced in their consciousness they may seem, look, or feel, they are still inundated with 3D consciousness. So every once in a while, they're going to be thrown into that consciousness. And so it's a matter of how do you handle, how do you experience the 3D consciousness without a lens of judgment, without a lens of right and wrong. That's what we're stepping into in 2020. That's what we're preparing for in the next 2 months. How do I try my best to stop judging any experience I'm having in my awakening process? How do I start to recognize and know that I am a being of consciousness that is a much higher frequency than what my physical form is standing in? Thank God my physical form is here because it's allowing me, the higher state of consciousness, to be here. And as I'm walking around, consumed by 3D consciousness, I become more and more conscious and aware that I am participating in all of this and that there is no judgment about how I am navigating it. It doesn't mean that I'm less than or better than any other human consciousness or any other consciousness for that matter out there in that field, right? You hold the fact that yes, you may be a galactic being. You may be a hybrid that was designed within this 12D field, right? You may be an angelic being. You may be a massively larger collective consciousness that came from a 50th dimensional field. You may have come straight from source, right? There is an infinite amount of possibilities of where your consciousness came from. There's nothing special or unique about that, right? I think sometimes in the spiritual community, we get into this because we're remembering who we are, right? And so it's like, oh my God, we're aliens, we're galactic beings, we're this, we're that. And the more we just let that be, it's almost like it's a new thing for a lot of us because we're remembering it, but it's not a big deal, right? It's like, okay, yeah, you may be a Palladian, you may be a Syrian, you may be a Lyrian, you may be an angelic realm, you may be a hybrid that was designed, a race that was created millions of years ago, that is from a 5th dimensional planetary system somewhere, right? It's exciting. It's like, oh my God, where am I from? Who am I? What is all this, right? But you're still human. You're still going to step outside and you're still going to get angry with somebody perhaps, or you may have to argue about a bill that came and they charged you too much, right? Or your credit card may get stolen, or there's so many things that are going to happen. You can't in the 3D that you can't escape it. No matter how enlightened, how high vibration you get, how much you try to stay in that 5D consciousness, you're still going to find yourself surrounded by 3D. Okay? So it's a matter of us starting to recognize that we're not leaving, escaping anything that we're experiencing. We've got to try to really get clear on that. Even in terms of trying to shift our thoughts or beliefs, right? Because one of the things Saint Germain said was, we all have choice. And the more we become multidimensional, the more we recognize that choice, right? Because we're in a quantum space, so we can access any consciousness. But the key to choice, he said, is, are you choosing from an egoic structure, or are you choosing from a heart structure? And I'll tell you why he's differentiating. And there's nothing wrong with either choice, but be aware of what consciousness you're choosing you're choosing that in that quantum field, what consciousness what aspect of your consciousness, what aspect of your consciousness, here or here, are you choosing when you're in the quantum? Meaning, I'm going to choose a different thought. I'm going to choose a different belief. I'm going to choose a different program, a different paradigm, a different way of being. I'm going to choose something differently, right? Are you choosing out of a discomfort and an uncomfortableness Or are you choosing, which would be an egoic way of choosing? Because when things are uncomfortable, it makes sense to want to choose something different. This isn't high vibration. This isn't creating the highest vibration in my body. This isn't good for me. This is dense. This is a low frequency, a low consciousness. All these things we label when actually it's just a consciousness. That's it, right? Maybe it makes you feel uncomfortable, like you have these thoughts that you're not good enough and that you can't do it this way and that you're always going to be in a lack mentality. You know, whatever it is, right? First of all, what Saint Germain was saying was, it's just a consciousness. There's nothing wrong with it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with lack mentality. There's nothing wrong with not loving yourself. When I say nothing wrong, what I mean is, it's just a consciousness that we've been experiencing in this 3D field. When we label it as wrong because it doesn't feel good and because it's not true from a different perspective if you were to step out of it. It's true when you're in it, right? It's totally true. I deeply have experienced massive amounts of self-hatred. And when I was in those spaces, it was my reality and it was true. So to tell somebody that's not true is denying their reality. Yes, that's true. I live in lack. That is my belief system. I don't. But there are millions that live in lack, right? And that is, in the quantum space, an actual reality, right? And a truth. And so is the opposite. Right? Flipping that coin, the opposite. There is nothing wrong with either of those. And when you can start to feel into that a little bit, it can be very uncomfortable and you're going to fight. You may fight that in the beginning, right? But here's what Saint Germain wants us to look at. Can you look at lack and abundance in the same lens from a higher perspective? Meaning lack is just a consciousness that I get to choose to be in. Abundance is a consciousness that I get to choose in. One feels better, right? One absolutely feels better. And if somebody were to say, here, you can have $1 million, every year, or you could have $20,000 every year, the human most likely is going to be like, oh, give me the million, right? Because that's the field of consciousness we live in. From a bigger perspective, it's all just experiences. So when we are starting to step into the next couple of months and you are really aware, because most of you are, of what you're thinking, feeling, moving through, releasing, letting go of, continuing to do that. When you recognize you're multidimensional and that you can tap into the quantum, which means, again, any field of consciousness you can tap into, why are you doing it? Okay, so I don't like feeling lack, or it doesn't serve me anymore. I don't like feeling self-hatred for myself. It doesn't feel good anymore. Now we stop in that space. Okay, so it's baby steps, right? I don't like it. It's not serving me anymore. It's a reality that served me for a very long time. Okay, great. Now, 2, can you look at that as an actual service to you? Wow. Look at how many years I played in that consciousness and what it provided me. And the way I experienced this third dimensional realm as a higher dimensional consciousness in physical form. Wow. For me, my self-hatred stemmed from trauma when I was really young that I chose, that I created. And man, I had physical abuse from a boyfriend. I had mental and emotional abuse from boyfriends. I had an eating disorder. I had drug addiction. I had alcohol addiction. I had no self-esteem or confidence in myself, right? So I chose relationship after relationship. As I'm stepping out of that consciousness, I look back as the story was shown to me, right? Here's the story of my life. And it's like, wow, okay. Now that I am really, finally ready to say, I am done. That served me. The second step you're doing is you are honoring it. That's coming from the heart center, right? It's this feeling of thank you. Instead of the ego that says, I don't like this. I don't like being in this. This isn't fun. I want out. I want out. I want out. I want out. That's ego. Because what happens when you are choosing from an egoic structure in the quantum is you're going to get pulled right back in. And why is that? Because we are designed as multidimensional beings to learn how to love all of it. We have got to be able to walk out into our realities and into our consciousnesses that is swimming in 3D and love it all. We've got to be able to love the power outages that happen. I'm not sure if I'm there yet, right? We've got to love all the governmental bureaucracy. We've got to love the destruction that's happening on the earth plane. This is by all means not easy. But this is what we are stepping into, because as light workers and way showers, we have got to be able to start to practice learning how to love everything that's occurring. Not just loving ourselves, not just loving those that's a little bit easy to love, right? We have to love all of it. We have to learn how to love all of it. How do we practice that? We start with ourselves, and we start with loving the consciousnesses that we are in. It's not that you have to stay in it, but a lot of us will say to ourselves, well, I keep choosing something different, but then I find myself back in it. And Saint Germain is smiling and, nodding his head like, yes, because you don't love it. You don't love it. You don't see it for how it served you. Because when you really deeply love what you went through as a human, the traumas, the pains, the destruction, the desperation, the homelessness, the abuse, the neglect. We've gone through a lot as human forms, as higher dimensional consciousness, you guys, in the human form. We have gone through a lot. And if we can't see it through the lens of love before we try to shift out of it, we are going to be thrown back into it. Because you don't choose something different until you can love that which you're in. That's how we actually literally shift. We're always shifting energetically. Always. Meaning there's always high frequency light coming in. And we are always the body's assimilating, acclimating and anchoring that light. And then we start to get more conscious. We start to get more aware. And we start to recognize what we no longer want in our reality, what no longer serves us. However, what we have done, what I have done, listen, this is a new message that came in for me in the last week that I've been doing. And I'm telling you right now, it has shifted my reality. Now it becomes, we're aware, we're conscious, we're feeling it, we're letting it move through us, right? All the density we're clearing out. And again, the reason that you're clearing out density isn't because it's not good or it's not right. It's because that's the natural process of high frequency light moving into the form. So the natural process of what just occurs is that as high frequency light continues to move through the physical form and you're aware and conscious of it, then you can be aware and conscious of the denser consciousness that's being pushed out. If you are not consciously aware of this process, then the high frequency light is almost like sludge. It's just not going to get through, right? You're just not going to get through it. The light's going to get stuck in the density of that physical form, which is fine. Millions of humans are not consciously aware of what's occurring right now on the earth plane, this ascension process, right? What you'll notice is the more that you are consciously aware of what's happening, the more light you're going to feel coming in, the more density you're going to feel leaving. And then the next time you get an influx of massive amounts of light when portals open, right, you're going to feel it more. You're going to be like, oh my God, I'm feeling this. You're going to start to feel it because you're becoming conscious and aware. Through this awakening process, though, we also start to say, well, why isn't everything shifting around me? Why do I have to manipulate and maneuver all of this in this 3D world? I don't want to have to explain all of this to my family. I don't want to have to pretend to be something that I'm not in my work environment. And you're going to have to not do that anymore come 2020, right? So these next 2 months, and I'll do a video directly after this about how to navigate awakening when everyone around you isn't. It's an extremely important video, but you are going to have to recognize that this is your role. This is what you're here to do, to navigate this, all of this without escaping. So a lot of times we dive into these spiritual concepts. We dive into trying to feel these higher frequencies, right? We dive into meditation. We dive into being with the Octurians, the Syrians, the Palladians, any ascended master. We dive into being with them because it feels good. It allows us to remember who we are. It allows us to remember where we're going. It allows us to sort of escape for a moment, right? But when we open our eyes, what happens? We're right back into the density. And so what is being asked of us is stay in the density, love everything that you are learning to shift out of, love it, because you will find yourself not suffering and struggling as much. You'll find yourself relaxing into all of it. Just relaxing into it. So, back to the consciousnesses that no longer serve you, right? Can you, and not just like, oh yeah, I love it. No. Can you recognize how it served you? And again, we're all on different paths of our awakening journey. So some of us listen, 6 months ago, I may not have been able to look at my self-hatred and the trauma and the abuses and the way I treated myself for so long. I may not have been able to look at it with the self-compassion and love that I'm doing right now. That's the beauty of ascension, is that no matter what we do, you guys, there will come a time where out of the blue, naturally, you're going to be able to find yourself loving it. It's like, oh shit, how'd that happen? I didn't take any course on that. That just happened. Because we are learning to be masters, ascended masters in physical form. We're learning how to love all of it. Shifting out of something and into something else because you don't want to be in it is denying what you're in, which means that there's a judgment around it, right? When you love that which you are in and that which you've been in, then there's not this race to get out of it. It's almost like the quantum space opens and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can literally choose now. There's a freedom that happens when you fall deeply in love with your traumas and with the pains and with the belief systems and with the programs. You almost start to look at these paradigms about shifting your thoughts and, manifesting or changing the way you're thinking, feeling, or believing. You almost start to look at it like, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to deny that which you've designed and created for yourself? Why don't you love it first before you say goodbye to it? When you start loving it and all the behaviors you did throughout your life, right? Because I can look back and I'm like, oh, there's my very first boyfriend in high school, right? Wow, I remember how he treated me. Okay. And I go to that girl. I go to that little 16, 17-year-old who was literally my very first boyfriend, had his hands around my neck one night, strangling me. And I go to that little girl and I think about that, and then I watch how she managed that, right? Then she stayed. Oh, wow, she stayed with him. Wow, what else did she do? Oh, she started drinking heavily. Oh, she got rid of him, and then she went into college, and then she started drinking heavily. And then she would start sleeping with men without even knowing who they were, right? Then she started using drugs. And so I'm watching this pattern in my life. And I'm recognizing that it's a choice that I created the entire time to play out a massive trauma that I brought in. I didn't bring the trauma in. I brought the Akashic record in. Of not feeling worthy, of not knowing what it meant to be safe in my body, to not know deeply how to unconditionally love myself. How do I unconditionally love myself, right? Now that I am literally finally, 44 years later, allowing myself to release it for good. The only way I want to release it is with love. Deep honoring of that life, of that woman, of that little girl, of that 16-year-old, of that 21-year-old, right? The entire journey of Lori, I'm going to honor. Instead of saying, I don't like these behaviors and these thoughts and the beliefs that I'm holding. I don't like them and they don't serve me anymore and I'm going to shift out of them. How am I going to shift out of them? Well, I'm just going to flip over and find, and go into a consciousness that's holding love and self-compassion. And I love myself. I'm beautiful. How many times have we done that, right? We say these mantras and we try to convince ourselves, because it is a consciousness you can tap into. We try to convince ourselves of these consciousnesses that are available, that we can pull in any now moment. But if you're like me, this consciousness that I've experienced since I was 6 years old to 44 is not easy to just think my way out of. It's asinine. It's embarrassing. I'm just going to think my way into a different consciousness. I'm going to pull consciousness out of the quantum field and then just be it. I'll tell you what, it hasn't happened. It hasn't worked. Why? Because I didn't honor, love, value, cherish, and see this entire experience, my entire beautiful Lori life for what it is, for what it gave me. We all have a story. We're all stepping out of these stories. All of us. You can't deny your human story, you guys. You can't deny it. It is an aspect of your journey. It's an aspect of you that you experienced. It would be like watching this beautiful person experience their beautiful life and then saying, okay, that was great, but I'm going to try to get out of that now because I don't like this. I don't want to be this. I don't want to do this, blah, 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 right? No, with compassion and love, unconditional love, you would look at that human and say, good freaking job. You survived. You survived. You know how many times I should have died or killed somebody through my drunk driving? I can't even tell you. Why aren't we honoring our survival of what we've gone through instead of denying it or trying to get out of it? Look at what you've gone through. Look at what you've survived as a human. That's what Saint Germain would be saying right now. Look at what you've done. And now, beautiful, because you have shifted into higher states of consciousness, you now get to choose. And in that choice, can you choose from a place of deeply, deeply loving all of what you went through? And when you fall into that deep love for what you've gone through, you will notice that there's not going to be this immediate need to get out of it. It's almost like, wow, I almost kind of want to honor it even more. Deeply honor that girl and that teenager and that 25-year-old and that 30-year-old. Look at what she did to survive. Look at what she did to survive. And now, in higher states of consciousness, as you become a multidimensional human, I'm not becoming a multidimensional galactic being. I'm not becoming a multidimensional source being. I'm becoming a multidimensional human, which means that I am not escaping the human form. My higher dimensional consciousness is starting to become aware by my humanness, my ego, my personality, my higher self, my I am presence. It's all starting to turn on. The DNA that holds the light codes that I brought in as a higher dimensional consciousness are turning on. And what is it doing that's allowing me, as my DNA, there's these really cool terms that we use in spiritual reality or spiritual world, is that like your light DNA is turning on, your light codes are turning on, right? What is it allowing me to do? Love the hell out of my third dimensional humanness. It's not saying, hey, your DNA is starting to really activate. You're starting to become even more multidimensional. And guess what? You're going to escape out of this reality and out of this dimension and out of this humanness. It's not what it's doing at all. It's the opposite. It's saying, hey, your light codes are turning on. Guess what that means? You're going to love the freak out of yourself even more. That means you're going to turn and look at these aspects of you that you're still holding, whatever it is, and you're going to love the hell out of it. And that's freedom. And that's ascension. That's ascending. That's awakening. That is courage. That is what we're doing. That's what we're doing. These next 2 months are all about being able to deeply recognize and love your entire story in 3D. All of it. And not try to escape out of it or make it bad or make it wrong or I should have done this 25 years ago. I should have done that. The judgments. No way. Honor your journey as a third dimensional human, because what I'm going to tell you is that pretty damn soon that reality will no longer exist for you. So you might as well love the freak out of it. It's already done. You've already experienced it. Why the freak wouldn't you love it? Because when we get into 2020, it's a whole new reality we're stepping into. If you're in that frequency. And if you're not, you'll get there. It's about being able to recognize I'm not going anywhere. Saint Germain didn't leave the physical plane in order to ascend. He didn't try to force himself or move himself into higher states of consciousness. He allowed the awakening process to happen naturally, like a flower blooming. There's moments where the flower may come down and shrink, and there's moments where it's going to bloom, right? Depending upon what's going on. But the flower never denies who it is. The flower never tries to move into a different type of flower. It doesn't try to move itself into where there's more light so it can grow in a different way, right? I want to grow faster. I want to grow taller. I want to grow brighter. No, the flower just allowed itself to go through its natural process and journey. That's what we do as masters on the earth plane ascending. He's saying he had to learn this, right? But he learned it through just knowing and allowing himself to naturally move through awakening, high frequency light, activating him over and over and over and over and over again. And that's what we're doing now, right? We're like, oh my God, now this is happening. Oh my God, now this is happening. I don't know about you guys, but that's what's happening for me. I turn around and the next thing I know, a week later, there's something brand new that I'm recognizing about our humanness. For instance, I now recognize and understand the power of actually loving unconditionally that which I am trying to clear out of me or release. I'm talking any thought, any belief, any program, any paradigm, anything that we have been learning to get conscious of, practicing how to acknowledge, feel, see, hear. Now we are noticing and recognizing we live in quantum space field where everything's accessible. So then it becomes, oh my God, I can choose whatever I want. And yet what we've noticed is that you'll choose it and yet it won't stick into your reality. The next thing we're recognizing and learning, it's because I haven't loved unconditionally that belief system, that paradigm, that program, that trauma, that emotion. Very challenging in the beginning. Listen, no one said ascension is easy. No one said awakening is easy. But we start, we move forward, and we continue to take baby steps. Right? That's what we're doing. You guys, you survived. We're stepping into such an amazing time. There's so much freedom coming for us. There's so much peace that is literally at our fingertips. We're so close to freedom and peace Even those of you that are homeless and living in a car, those of you that have no job and that don't know when the next paycheck is coming or the next food is coming, that reality, whether it happens in your space and time or whether it happens as we, the collective, shift and pull, right? You may not be able to get yourself out of that experience yet, but all of us that are moving forward, you're moving forward as well. But sometimes when you are in a dense reality, as a light worker and a way shower, it can be very hard to be on the front lines. It's almost like you want to say, hey, listen, you guys, I need you to go ahead because I am literally just trying to survive right now. There's millions of light workers and way showers that are literally just trying to survive right now. And that is what's most important for them. And so there are millions of light workers and way showers that are saying, we got your back, chill out. We're going to move forward into this next massive dimensional space. And you're going to start to tap into it and you're going to be able to pull yourself out. That's what's happening. So if you find yourself in a really dense reality, okay, you will be pulled out of it. Whether you do it or the collective as light workers and way showers do it. You're not stuck in it, okay? You're not stuck in it. Anything that we're in this now moment will not remain. Everything's changing. Everything's shifting. And this is not easy to do. And I'm not in your shoes. But the more that we can surrender into whatever reality we find ourselves in, as uncomfortable and nauseating as that may be, the more you will learn unconditional love, the more you will learn peace, the more you will recognize freedom, the more you will be able to navigate every single now moment going forward with no attachment or judgment. And always, there is this deeper underlying knowingness that it was all designed by you in some other dimensional aspect of you, even though that may not be hard to hear, easy to hear, right? It's all a beautiful portrait of your third dimensional life that you will absolutely, unequivocally, without a doubt, move out of. And there will come a time where you will start to look at your third dimensional painting or book that you laid out for yourself and that you played out quite beautifully. And you'll say, remember when I was doing that? Remember when I experienced that? Remember when I lived in that density? Remember when I lived in that really dense third dimensional consciousness? Remember when I didn't even remember who I was? Remember all these things, right? But you will be shifting out of that. And you will eventually find deep love and compassion for that journey. And there is a massive freedom in that. So it's almost like we've been putting the cart ahead of the horse or whatever that is, right? So we're recognizing that we're these massively multidimensional beings and we're trying to access all of this stuff. And yet we haven't mastered yet the ability to unconditionally love everything that we're in. Trying to positive think your way into a different space or reality or consciousness is great if you love deeply that which you're trying to get out of. If you don't love that which you're trying to get out of, then you're trying to get out of it without the recognition from the higher dimensional aspect of you of what that is. And so there's always going to be this energetic pull back down, right? You may be able to find yourself experiencing that abundant consciousness, but all of a sudden something's going to happen and you're going to be triggered back down into that lack mentality. Or there's going to be this stretching, this really challenging stretch, like you're just not free of this. You're not free of the lack of self-worth. You're not free of the judgments you're holding. You're not free of lack. You're not free of these yet. Where does the freedom come from? Unconditionally freaking loving every aspect of it. All of it. And then you just know that whenever you're ready, off you go. And that's where you become, and you recognize the power of choice, and you recognize the power of shifting into your multidimensionality and into the quantum space. You're doing it from this space of really potent heart resonance, as opposed to the egoic resonance. You know, the egoic resonance is get out of pain and into joy. The heart says, love it all. Love it all. Not easy, I know. But you guys are amazing, amazing, amazing higher dimensional beings in physical form. And many of you are galactic, hybrid being, you know, a multitude of different higher dimensional beings that were created into a specific type of race or consciousness. And then you decided to participate in. Many of you are starting to remember all of these different lifetimes that you've had on the earth plane with fourth dimensional beings that may have not had your best interest at hand, or higher dimensional light beings that were actually on the earth plane because they were on the earth plane between 8,000 and 5,000 years ago with us. The story of who we are and what we've gone through is quite miraculous. And it puts this moment into it's just a blurb in the history of what we've gone through as a consciousness participating with the earth as a consciousness. I can't wait to get my book out. So, know that you're rock stars and you're amazing, and that you're doing it. We all are learning this along the way. We're all learning this along the way. And it takes a lot of courage to be the ones that are consciously doing it. So if you're watching this video, you are consciously saying, yes, yes, I'm doing this. I'm putting my light worker, way shower hat on, and I'm doing this. So bravo. You're deeply, deeply loved. You are deeply, deeply held and loved and watched. There are so many beings at your disposal to talk to, connect with, hear from. Right? And the more that we shift, the more you're going to be hearing from them. You will. Mark my words, you will. So have patience. Unconditionally, deeply love all of your humanness. All of it. Just settle in and relax into this 3D because you ain't going anywhere. You may tap into 5D consciousness and you may be living in it all the time, but guess what? You're still going to walk outside, and there's still going to be a government, and there's still going to be politics, and there's still going to be laws, and there's still going to be rules, and there's going to be all of this structure around you that exists in 3D. So you might as well surrender to it and figure out a way to unconditionally love it all. Slowly. Very hard for me to unconditionally love PG&E continuing to do blackouts. That's a doozy. But we're all in realities that we're having to surrender to, right? More and more. Surrender, surrender, surrender. Anyways, I'm just going on now. I love you guys so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this community. I love you all so much. If you haven't subscribed, click the subscribe button and then click the bell button, because the bell button will give you notifications of when I go live. I go live every other Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So if you don't click the bell button, you won't get notified. And if you're not subscribed, you won't get notified. And if this video resonated with you and you loved it, please give me a thumbs up. Let me know in your comments below if this made sense to you, if this resonated, if it didn't. I read every single comment. And I love you. I will see you guys very soon whenever I see you. I'm doing a live Q&A on Monday at 11 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time on my online community, the StarGate Circle, and it's on Patreon, and you can find that on the link below. It's $23 a month. unsubscribe at any time. But if you want to join us for a live 90-minute Q&A, as well as a 60-minute live channeled message the following week, and a free mini session with one of the community members the week after, come over and join us. I love you. Be gentle with yourselves. Be gentle, 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 and I'll see you next time. Mwah.